Hello and welcome. Today we will be designing and weaving a cup. This is something that you can use as a pencil or marker holder or any type of container for your special items. So first we're going to need to gather our supplies for a cup. We will need a plastic or paper cup. We'll need a marker of some kind. And we'll need scissors. You're going to need different colored yarn and a sewing tape measure. Or if you don't have a sewing tape measure, you can also just use a ruler, and I'll show you how to do that. So once we have our supplies, we can prepare our cup for weaving. So we're going to need, the first step is we're going to measure all the way around the cup. And then we're going to make notches and cut all the way down and then weave those segments. So for the first step, I'm going to use a sewing tape measure to measure all the way around the top of the cup. So I'm just going to line it up underneath the top and then just wrap it all the way around, making sure that there's not any huge gaps that I'm pushing it up to the very top. And I get about 11 from where the tape measure meets the end of the tape. It's about 11 and a half. Now, if you don't have a tape measure, just take a piece of yarn. So I'm going to take this piece and then I am going to wrap this around the top of the cup. And then wherever the yarn meets the end of the yarn, I'm just going to cut it. So I'm just, again, making sure the yarn is all the way at the top. And I'm just going to cut it with my scissors. And then now you have this piece of yarn. And I'm going to take my ruler, and from the starting point where it's 0 on the ruler, I'm going to put one end there. And then see how far this yarn piece goes. And I get, again, 11 and a half inches. So we need to make note of that measurement. That measurement is called the circumference. Circumference means for a circle, all the way, the measurement all the way around. So we're going to make note of that measurement, and then we need to divide it by 9 in order to find the distance we need between our cup notches for weaving. So you see on this cup that's already done all the notches. So if you can't do the math, you can also use a calculator. I'll use a calculator. So 11.5 divided by 9 is 1.27777. I'm going to go with 1 1/4, just round down a little bit. If you have some trouble with the math, maybe ask an adult to help you with that part. So now that I have that measurement, 1 1/4 inch, I'm again going to take my tape measure. If you don't have a tape measure, just take another piece of yarn and measure it out along your ruler and cut that. And then you can use that piece of yarn all the way around. But since I have a tape measure, I'm just going to use that. So I'm going to make, with my marker, I'm going to make the first mark anywhere on the top of my cup. So like right here is fine. And then I'm going to take the tape measure and measure that amount, 1 1/4, about 1 1/4, and then I'll make my next mark. And then from that second mark, I'm going to measure the same amount. And then do that all the way around the cup until I have 9 notches. So 1/4. Okay, so I'm going to count all the way around. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So your cup should look like this. You should have even spaced notches all the way around. If they're not quite even, you can just try and even them out a little bit. Mine look, I think I'm going to go with mine. So the next step that we need to do, once we have marked all 9 of our notches on the top of the cup, we're going to use our scissors to, for every notch, we're going to cut all the way down for every notch, making sure to leave, I'm going to stop maybe 1/4 of an inch from the bottom of the cup right here. So a lot of paper cups or plastic cups already have this little bit at the bottom. Just leave that there because it'll help with the structural integrity of our cup once we're done weaving. So again, I'm just gonna cut this way. I'm going to cut the first notch, go all the way down, and then stop right about there. I'm gonna do that for every single notch. So when you're cutting, especially if you have a plastic cup, make sure that you're cutting in one smooth motions and trying to avoid any of like these snags, just because we'll be working with yarn as we're weaving. So if you have like really jagged lines, the yarn is gonna snag on it. So just try as you're cutting to cut as straight and as smooth as possible without doing a little zigzag. All right, last cut. Great. So now your cup should look like this, all of these segments. They should kind of flatten out like this. Almost looks like a sun. So now we're ready to start weaving. But before we start weaving, I want to talk first about color selection. So now we're going to go back to our yarn pieces. I have a lot of different yarn colors that I pulled out for this project. I like to choose colors that contrast with each other. So for contrasting colors, that means, say something like, kind of like a blue and like a bright yellow. Something where the colors are very distinct from each other. That's what contrasting colors mean. I like to choose contrasting colors so that you get very bold stripes that stand out from the other colors. You can also choose similar colors, like say this blue and green. See how similar they are. And that can be a really nice effect. It won't be as bold as these stripes, but they'll go together. Or you can choose, I think today I'm going to choose 2 colors that are similar and then choose a really contrasting color. So like maybe this yellow or even this yellow, which is even a little brighter. So you can, I'm going to use 3 colors, but you can choose as many colors as you want. Totally up to your design and what you want. So I'm going to put these other ones away. And so now that we have our colors, I got to choose one to start with first. I'm going to choose the blue. So I'm going to take the yarn end and my cup. So once you have your first yarn color, we can start anywhere, but we're going to start with the yarn end towards the inside of the cup. So I'm going to slide this all the way down 1 notch. And I want to leave at least like an inch long tail so that it's secure. So once I've secured the first end of my yarn all the way down on this notch here, I'm going to start weaving around the cup. So I go this way towards the right just because I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you may want to go this way and weave towards the left on your cup. So the first thing, I've tucked the end in with the end facing the inside of the cup. And now I'm going to start weaving. So the first one, I'm going to go over the first segment and then slide the yarn in the second notch and then out the third. So I'm going over the first segment, under the second. I'm going to go over the third. And that's basically weaving. You go over and under, over and under. And you'll notice the yarn kind of come up a little bit. Just use your fingers as you go to push the yarn down. I'm going to go over and under, and then keep going. So you'll end up back to where you started, but just keep doing the same thing. So over and under. So now I'm doing, when I've come around the second time, I'm going to go under the first segment that I went over when I first started weaving, so that all of these blank spaces are going to be filled in. So over and under. And again, as I go, I'm just going to push the yarn down to the end, over and under. It's going to be a little tricky at first because the cup, you've cut it all the way down to the bottom. So it's going to be a little floppy, but as you start building up the yarn, as you weave, it's going to come a little bit more together and stay together. So if this part is a little tricky for you to maneuver, don't worry, just keep going and it'll get easier as the more weaving that you do. So I'm going to keep going over and under, over and under. So again, like these spaces in between the yarn, don't worry, the more yarn you build up, you'll be able to push it down a little bit further to get a uniform color. So this is the basic weaving technique. And if you feel like you really like this technique, it's similar to basket weaving. So that may be something you want to try in the future if you really, really love this project, which I do. So keep going until either you run out of yarn or you want to change colors. So I'm going to keep going for a little bit longer, over and under, over and under. I'll go around one more time and then I'm going to show you how to change the colors out. So over and under, over, under here. So here I have a little jagged piece. I'm going to just cut that off with my scissors, just so no more of the yarn gets snagged on that. So that was what I was mentioning before, trying to avoid snags, but you can just trim it off if it's there. All right, so now that I've done one stripe of color, I can switch colors by ending the first color with an over. So I'm going to go over my last piece and then cut the yarn on the inside and leave a little tail about like an inch or so long so that the yarn end doesn't come out. But it's important to end on an over the segment so that the inside, the yarn end ends up inside of the cup and the outside looks very neat like that. So now I'm going to take my second color. Let's say I'm going to go with the yellow because that will really stand out from the first blue stripe that I made. And I'm going to spot where I ended that blue. So this is the notch that I ended. And I'm going to start the second color one notch away from that. So I'm not going to start it right where I ended. I'm actually going to go to the right because I'm moving in this direction and slide that second yarn color, that end here. So just to show you again, I ended the blue yarn piece here, and I'm going to start the yellow yarn piece on the next notch. And then as I've done that, and I have a little bit of a tail in there with the yellow piece, I'm going to keep going all the way around doing the same thing we did with the first color. I'm going to go over one piece and then under the next. over and under. So this basic weaving technique will just end up with stripes. So if you see this finished one, the first 3 colors I did this way. And you notice that there's spaces here. Well, once you have more yarn, you can push it down and you won't see those spaces. So the first 3 colors I did this way where I just did the yellow and then I switched to the blue and then a darker blue. But I want to show you, I'm going to do a little bit more of this color and then I'm going to show you a couple more techniques to add different design elements to your cup, just in case you get bored with all the stripes. But if you wanted to just do stripes on your design, that would look really nice and it'd be totally fine. And you could play with the color choices, which order you put the colors to really make your design pop. So I'm going to keep going with this for a little bit, just so that there's enough yellow to stand out. So I'll do one more time around, and then I'm going to show you another technique called marling. So marling is a technique that is used a lot in knitting. In knitting, usually you are knitting with one type of yarn, but when you knit with 2 different colored yarns at the same time, they get sort of blended together in an unpredictable way that is really beautiful. So I'm going to end this yellow color here. And again, what's nice about this project is you can end whenever you want. It's just really about your color choices. So if you want to do really thin stripes, you can do that. You want to do bigger stripes with 1 line of a color in between, you can do that as well. So on to the second technique, marling. This span right here is what marling is. So here I use yellow. Instead of just weaving with 1 color, I did 2 colors together. So I did yellow and dark blue because they contrast really well. But you can do similar colors as well and blend those together. Maybe I'll do that for this one. I will mix the blue with the green. So you can do this with 2 different colors, or if you want to get really funky, you could do it with 3 colors. So these colors mixed together well. I'm actually going to use, I'm changing my mind. This is a really fun project to do on the fly where, you know, you don't have to come up with the design right away. You can change your mind. So I want to do a contrasting color so that you can see it a little better on this camera, but doing it with similar colors also works really well as well. So but for this one, I'm going to do blue and this sort of maroon color together. So again, I'm going to note where I ended the yellow piece because I don't want to interrupt this pattern. So I ended the yellow yarn here. That means my next notch over is where I'm going to start. So I'm going to put this end piece here. And then again, leaving a tail long enough. I don't know if you can see that. Long enough so that the yarn doesn't come out the front side. And I'm going to do exactly what I was doing before. So now you can have 2 colors at one time. I like to also twist them together as I weave to really blend the colors and kind of get more unpredictable patterns. So here I'm pulling the 2 different yarns and I'm twisting it as I go. You don't have to do that. You just get a different effect if you don't. You get more of like a striped effect where it may be like maroon, blue, but I like to twist it to create more of a visual technique. So here you can see the colors kind of coming together in an unpredictable way. This I also twisted, and sometimes I left it just the 2 colors together as well. So play around with it. This part is the fun part. So really play around with it, twist it one way, twist it the other. But you're still going to be doing the same weaving pattern that we did before, where you go over one segment, under the next, and then over and under, over and under. So keep going until it's the amount you want. I'm going to keep twisting as I go. So I'll twist the yarn and then go under the next. I'm going to do this for a little bit more so you can see the effect. So an important thing to note, as I'm going around, I'm not really pulling super hard. So if you pull super hard, these segments will start to come in. You want to kind of be gentle with it and be a little bit loose so that the cup doesn't kind of concave in like that as you weave. Just be a little loose with it and in order to keep the shape of the cup. So again, it will get easier the more weaving that you do. It's a little bit hard in the beginning just because the cup gets a little floppy, but stay with it because you'll end up with a really beautiful finished piece. I'm going to do this a little bit more so you can see the effect. So again, I'm going over and under. I feel like the effect is better when you do contrasting colors, but definitely play around with your color choices. You can get more subtle effects with it. It's a little bit more bold when you do contrasting colors though, which is usually the case. All right, so I'm going to keep going. Over and under, over and under. Can you see how that looks? So I'm gonna just rotate it and you can see how the colors really blend. So instead of getting strong blocks of one color, you can mix them together and create kind of a blended color. So I'm once again gonna make sure to end my yarn piece going over a segment and then cutting the yarn so that there's enough of a tail. And I'm pushing it down with my fingers. So when you push the yarn down, it's easier to push it at where the notches are. Push the yarn down at the notches will create a better smushed effect. You'll get rid of those spaces in between the yarn. So pushing down on the yarn at the notches. It's looking pretty good. I like it so far. So the third technique I want to show you is how to add a little trim element like a braid or a twist. So at the very top, if you can see, I braided some yarn together and just added it at the very top of my cup. It's kind of like a nice little trim on the top. So I'm going to show you how to do that next. So for braids, if you've done braids before, you need 3 pieces of yarn. So I'm going to do blue, red, and yellow. And then with the ends, the 3 ends of the yarn, I'm just going to tie a knot. And there are a couple of things that you can do. We need to in order to properly braid this. So I'm going to cut it. Let's say this looks like enough. So I'm just going to cut it so it goes all the way around the cup. This is more than enough length for that. But so for the knotted part, we're going to need to put a weight on this. You could, if you have like a cup or something like that, you could put a cup on top of it to start braiding. Or even use your notch here. So I can put it in my notch and then maybe place a few things, I don't know, like a glue bottle inside. That's not such a good one, but some sort of weight in here, maybe like a rock or something like that, in order to keep that end piece stable. So now that I have my yarn end in here, I can start braiding, if you know how to braid, to kind of create a really nice trim piece. If you don't know how to braid, no problem. You can just twist it. So this requires, you don't even really need to weight this down, just holding one end and then twisting the yarns so that it creates this beautiful pattern. So I'm going to just keep twisting it, twisting it. And the more you twist it, the tighter the colors will be together. So I think that's pretty good. And then once you've twisted it how you want, then you're going to tie another knot. I'm going to tie another knot at the bottom. And then we're going to wrap it all the way around the cup, wherever you want it. I put mine on the top of my cup as like a little finishing piece, but you can put it in the middle. And then now that we have these knot ends, I'm going to bring them together and then just slide them down one of the notches. Doesn't matter which notch, because it's going to go all the way around the cup. And just pull that in there. So you do get a little bit of a twist. Another way to add color, you can try multiple. If you're doing the twist, you could do 5 strands of yarn and really make it colorful. But yeah, it's just another technique to add. Or if you do a braid and it's a little, the colors are a little bit tighter together, it looks really nice when you wrap it around. So now you have 3 different techniques to add color to your cup. You can create stripes using the regular weaving pattern that we did before with just one color. And you can also marl the colors together. And marling is taking at least two pieces of yarn. You can do 3 or more and do the same weaving pattern, but with the colors together. And then you also learned how to do a braid or twist, tying with the knots at the beginning and the end, and then wrapping it around and sliding both ends through one notch. So experiment with those 3 different techniques to create your design. And when you get all the way to the top of the cup, you're ready to finish your design. So if you look inside your cup at the end of your project, there's going to be a bunch of loose ends. And the more colors you use, the more loose ends there'll be. So there are 2 ways to clean up the inside. One way, and this is my preferred way to clean up this design, so if you can see all of the strand pieces in here, is there's also a weaving design inside the cup that actually matches what's on outside of the cup. So I'm going to take these loose ends with my finger and just slide it into the weaving on the inside so that you don't see that end. So I can do that for as many yarn pieces as possible, but sometimes at the very bottom, it's going to be really hard to do unless you have small hands and you can really stick your finger at the bottom. So the other technique, the second technique I would recommend, is to take your scissors and making sure not to actually cut the yarn pieces that are in the woven pattern, just the ends. I'm going to just trim it, but I'm still going to leave at least a little tail, like a little 1/2 inch long tail. I don't want to cut all the way to the cup because the yarn end might pop out on the outside of it, which wouldn't look super nice and might ruin my design. So when you're cutting, just make sure you don't cut all the way to the cup. Just leave a little bit of tail, but the inside will be nice and clean and leave you enough space to put whatever you want inside. And if you did the braid, you'll have a little bit of a longer piece like this. Remember when we did the braid, we put the ends of the braid inside the same notch. So in order to secure that, before I trim it, I'm just going to take both ends of the braid or twist, and I'm going to make one big knot that's close to the cup. So I'm going to take both those ends, make a knot. So now there's a knot there, and I know my braid is super secure, and then I can trim it. Just going to cut it on the other side of that knot. And you see how this little end piece here, you can also tuck that in. Tuck that into the weaving with your finger. And it doesn't disappear entirely, but you can barely see it. So that's how you clean up and finish your design on the inside. And once you've done that, then you can use it as a cup holder, put your supplies in there. And then the one last thing I wanted to mention is a lot of these cups have, like you can see here, they have like a white top. If you want to, one last thing that you can do with your design is you can take a marker and just, really make the top of the lid of the cup any color you want. So that can really finish off your design. I hope you enjoyed this project, and we'll see you next time.